I stopped counting the years they talked over me, instead of to me. Every time I tried to speak, someone in that house decided what I meant, what I needed, who I was. And I let them, because peace was easier to fake than to fight for. But standing there after the funeral, my grandfather's name still fresh on the stone, I heard my own family whispering through a half-closed door. They weren't grieving. They were planning. Every word peeled something raw inside me that had been bleeding for years. I used to think silence was how you survived a family like mine. That day, I learned silence can also bury you alive. So I made myself a quiet promise, right there on the porch. They won't see it coming, and when they do, it'll already be too late. The funeral ended hours ago, but the quiet stayed with me like damp air. I drove through the long stretch of Highway 93, the world outside washed in gray light after the rain. The tires hummed steady, and I let them drown out everything that felt unfinished. Before leaving the cemetery, my grandfather's lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, pressed a small silver flash drive into my hand. He trusted you, Morwen. Said you'd know what to do. I hadn't looked at it since. My grandfather believed in silence, not explanations. Ash Hollow rose out of the trees the way bad memories do. Slow, familiar, and impossible to avoid. The lake mirrored the sky, flat and colorless. Our old house slumped at the end of the road, paint peeling, porch bowed, 10 years gone, and still it felt like walking into a paused argument. I climbed the steps. The boards creaked. I almost knocked, then froze. She doesn't even know what she's holding. Once she signs the release, it's all ours, my brother's voice. Then my mother's, smooth and certain. Dr. Keene already agreed to the evaluation. Once the paperwork's done, she won't be able to contest anything. The flash drive felt heavy in my hand. They were talking about me. Silence isn't weakness, it's timing. His voice again, my grandfather's, so I stayed quiet. I opened the door. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and old deceit. "Oh, sweetheart, you're home. You must be so tired." "Just a little," I said, inside. I started to count the lies. The next morning, the house greeted me with a silence that hummed. I woke in my old room, the lace curtains still yellowed, the family photo still hanging crooked on the wall. Only one thing had changed. My grandfather's picture was gone. The empty space it left behind felt louder than any sound. A soft knock came at the door. My mother's voice slipped through. "I made you breakfast. Honey, you need to eat." The eggs were cold, the coffee thin, and her eyes followed every movement of my fork. I felt like a specimen under glass. Her concern was too smooth, rehearsed down to the tilt of her head. "You've lost weight," she said. "You should stay a while. Maybe we can help you get better." "Better from what?" I asked. She didn't answer, just looked at my plate and began collecting dishes with the quiet precision of a person who wants control over everything she touches. When she turned away, I noticed my car keys were missing from the hook. "Darren's fixing the ignition," she said quickly. I nodded, pretending not to notice how my life was shrinking inch by inch. That afternoon, their voices leaked from the kitchen. "We'll need her signature by Monday." "And the doctor?" "He's in. Said she's been under stress for years." I pressed record on the backup phone hidden in my suitcase. Later, moonlight spilled across the living room floor. The clock on the wall ticked, a single red light pulsing behind its glass face. I reached up, opened it, and found a tiny camera blinking. I removed the battery and placed it back exactly where it had been. If they wanted proof I was losing my mind, I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. Every hallway here led backward. The wallpaper still peeled in the same places, but everything else gleamed too clean, too ordered, as if the house had been sterilized of warmth. It didn't feel lived in, it felt managed. At dinner, the air was tight enough to cut. My mother's voice floated between the clink of silverware. "Did you sleep at all?" "You look pale." Before I could answer, Darren chimed in, his tone casual. "She used to have anxiety attacks at her job. Remember, Mom?" I smiled thinly. I remember no one ever asked how I handled them. The conversation died. What lingered wasn't care, but calculation. I saw it now, every question filed away like evidence. They weren't checking on me, they were building a case. Later, I went into my grandfather's room to grab a blanket. The air still carried his faint scent of cedar and tobacco. In the desk drawer, beneath a stack of receipts, I found a medical folder with my name typed neatly on the front. Diagnosis: severe anxiety disorder. Signed, Dr. Keene. Final note: patient may not be capable of informed consent regarding financial matters. The words froze me in place. My hands shook as I scanned each page, then took photos with the flash drive's small camera. I'd once spent years tracing the flow of stolen money across federal accounts, yet I never imagined the biggest fraud I'd ever uncover would bear my own last name. Through the thin wall that night, my mother's voice drifted from the hallway. She's almost ready. Just a few more days. I closed my eyes, the faintest smile tugging at my lips. Yes. Mother. A few more days. But not for what you think. Morning light poured through the dusty glass, touching the rim of the coffee cup my mother left for me. The scent was off, thin and overly sweet, like comfort gone stale. She said I looked pale and mentioned she'd called Dr. Keene, the best psychiatrist in the county, just to check on me. The name hit like static. I'd seen it printed on the forged medical file I'd found in my grandfather's drawer. I nodded anyway, keeping my face soft, my voice small. Let them play their game. I'd play mine better. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. A man in a gray suit stood there, silver hair slicked back, smile careful and professional. My mother and Darren sat together on the couch, postured as if concern could be choreographed. "Do you ever feel confused about what's real?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said, "especially when people pretend to care." He hesitated. My mother's hand landed on my shoulder, like a warning disguised as love. "Sweetheart, it's just a few questions," he continued, scanning his notes. Then came the slip. "Your brother mentioned you had anxiety attacks while working for the Bureau, right?" I froze. Darren had shared information no one should have known. My chest stayed still while my mind filed it away. By the time he left, I'd captured every word with the tiny pen recorder clipped to my sleeve. He told my mother he'd send the report tomorrow. Keep her calm. No stress. No driving. I asked if he recorded his sessions. Of course, confidentially. Good. Because I recorded this one too. The air locked. My mother's laugh cracked in the middle. "She's tired," she said. "She doesn't know what she's saying." "You're right," I said. "I'm tired." Of pretending. That night, I printed a few pages from a fake journal and left it on my desk. I think I'm losing time again. Maybe they're right. Hours later, I heard them whispering outside my door. "It's working. She's breaking." I smiled into the dark. Not me. Mom. The house held its breath the next morning. My mother and Darren left early to meet a lawyer, giving me my first taste of freedom in days. I went straight to my grandfather's room. The lock gave easily. The air still smelled of cedar and smoke. On the desk, a single photograph of us leaned crooked in its frame. I lifted it, found an envelope taped behind it. His handwriting trembled across the paper. "If you're reading this, it means they've already started." Inside, a password and a line that stopped my breath. The inheritance isn't just property. It's proof of who they are. I opened the laptop, typed the code, and the video appeared. My grandfather sat under dim light, his voice rough but steady. "They'll say it's love. It's not. It's fear in a kind mask. Morwen, the land, the house, and the trust are yours, but they'll destroy you to keep what they think is theirs." Tears blurred the screen. He'd known everything. A file followed. Notarized documents transferring every Hale asset to my name. Effective upon Henry Hale's passing. Do not announce until you confirm safety. Then came the debts. Bank statements, overdue loans, forged signatures, my mother's, Darren's. The ranch was sinking. They weren't greedy. They were desperate. I backed up every file, encrypted it, and sent copies to the email written at the bottom of the letter. Bell, consulting at. Whoever Bell was, he'd soon know everything. When they returned that night, I played the exhausted daughter. Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe I do need help. She smiled, triumphant. You'll see, sweetheart. It's for your own good. I smiled back. I will, Mom. I'll see everything. Later. In the quiet glow of the paused video, my grandfather's last words stared back at me. Silence isn't surrender. It's the start of strategy. Then let the strategy begin. That morning felt too bright to be real. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, glinting off silverware laid out like an invitation. My mother stood by the stove, humming as she cooked eggs. The smell of toast, heavy with intention. Darren sat at the table, shirt ironed, smile stretched too tight. Between the plates sat a stack of papers, temporary authorization form. You don't have to decide anything today, my mother said. It's just paperwork to help us handle bills until you feel better. I looked down. The first line read, Transfer of Administrative Rights. My hand trembled just enough as I said, I don't understand all this legal stuff. That's why you have us, she replied. I signed. But the paper wasn't theirs. It was my copy, printed last night, a replica that nullified itself upon verification. Once it's filed, the lake property's practically ours, Darren blurted. Lake property? I asked softly. My mother's glare silenced him. But the damage was done. When she cleared the table, I saw a loan notice stuck under a receipt. Flathead Credit Union. Borrower, Eleanor Hale. North Ranch Lot. Collateral. They weren't greedy. They were drowning. I returned to my room, opened my laptop, and sent an email to Belle, consulting at. It's happening. Evidence attached. Need counsel. That night, their whispers slipped through the walls. She signed it. You're sure it's the real one? I watched her do it. Perfect, I thought. Let them believe it. I packed the flash drive, recorder, and phone. Outside, the moon cast silver over the still lake. Time to leave the nest of snakes. I drove through the forest at 2 a.m. Headlights off until the road widened. The lake shimmered under moonlight. The cabin waiting like memory preserved. Inside, dust hung in the air, and an envelope sat on the table. If you're here, trust Belle. Moments later, headlights cut across the porch. A man stepped out, mid-40s, sharp suit, calm eyes. Andrew Bell, my grandfather's private counsel. From his briefcase, he pulled documents. A secondary trust, he said, hidden from the family lawyer. Activated only if I proved coercion. I handed him the flash drive and recordings. You've already done half the work, he said. Now we finish it legally. He filed the evidence through APS Watchdog. Then he showed me the truth. My mother had refinanced the ranch 3 times. Darren's accounts were tied to gambling debt. They didn't betray me for greed, I said. They did it because they were drowning. That's not an excuse, Bell replied. It's a motive. Before leaving, he warned me they'd file for emergency guardianship within 72 hours. We'll be there first. He promised. I stood on the porch long after his truck disappeared. Coffee warming my hands. Lake still as glass. Tomorrow, they'll try to own me, I whispered. Tomorrow. I'll own the truth. I wasn't sure if I had slept. When light crept through the cabin window, it felt thin, fragile. The wind moved through the pines like something waiting to be heard. Today was the day they would try to erase me. I dressed in black, simple and clean. On the table lay the USB recordings, debt files, all sealed. Belle glanced at me. They'll come dressed like mourners. Don't believe their grief. I don't anymore, I said. The Flathead courtroom was cold and colorless. My mother sat at the front, face carefully drawn into sorrow. Darren's hands were clasped tight. Doctor. Keene waited beside them. Posture rehearsed. The judge began. Case 6127, Petition for temporary guardianship. Eleanor Hale et al. Versus Morwen Hale. Bell stood, Your Honor, before any evaluation. The respondent submits evidence of coercion and fraud. My mother's voice trembled. She's confused. Judge, Bell pressed play. Once it's filed, the lake property's practically ours. She doesn't understand legal stuff. That's why you have us. Silence filled the room. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. Bell connected the USB. My grandfather's voice filled the air. If they're watching this, it means I'm gone. Morwen, the ranch, the lake, and the trust are yours. If anyone calls you unfit, they've already betrayed what family means. Then the payment appeared, $15,000 from Eleanor Hale to Dr. Keene. The judge's gavel cracked. Testimony void. Bell laid down the APS report confirming fraud. The judge turned to me. Only this. I said. I buried one family member already. I'm not burying my freedom too. The gavel fell again. Petition denied. Outside. Bell said quietly. You won, Morwen. No. I said. I just stopped losing. I didn't return to the old house. I went back to Mirror Lake. The cabin waited exactly as I remembered. Quiet, steady, untouched by the wreckage that had followed me. The air smelled of pine and rain. I cleared the table, placed my grandfather's photo back where it belonged, and opened the drawer beneath it. Inside was his worn leather notebook, the last thing he ever wrote. The ink had faded, but his words hadn't. I built wealth to protect love, but they used love to destroy wealth. If you're reading this, Morwen, let go of what can't be saved. Keep the part of us that still believes in decency. I read it until the words sank into me. He hadn't left money. He'd left clarity. True inheritance isn't what you keep. It's what you release. A few days later, a letter arrived in my mother's trembling handwriting. I was scared. Morwen, I wanted to save the family, not hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, only that you remember I tried. I folded it neatly, untouched by anger or sympathy. From my grandfather's video, I printed his last line. You can't save what you're willing to steal. I sent it back with one note. I remember, Mom, just not the way you hoped. That night, I sat by the lake, watching the moon ripple on the water. I used to think family was blood. Now I know. It's what doesn't drown you. I forgave them quietly, not for them, but for me. Because hate is just another kind of inheritance. A year after the hearing, Seattle was wrapped in rain. The city's rhythm pulsed softly outside my apartment window, the bay glinting silver through the fog. My life had grown smaller, quieter, and somehow fuller. I worked with a nonprofit that helped women reclaim their finances after guardianship abuse. Women who'd been told they were too fragile, too emotional, too lost to make choices for themselves. Most mornings, I started with coffee and the same ritual. Straighten the stack of case files on my desk. Touch the photo of my grandfather beside them. Then open the next folder. Today, it was a woman in her 50s, her son having drained her accounts under the guise of protection. She sat across from me, voice trembling. Inheritance isn't money, I told her gently. It's the power to say no. Her eyes lifted, a flicker of strength surfacing through exhaustion. I knew that look. I had worn it once. Weeks later, I spoke at a small community forum downtown. My name wasn't on the program. I didn't want it there. I told a story, mine, without the names, without the details, only the truth that mattered. If someone ever tells you you're too emotional to decide for yourself, remember, silence can be armor, not surrender. The audience was quiet for a moment. Then applause broke like rain against glass. I smiled. Not from pride, but from peace. The kind that comes only after you stop explaining yourself. By late summer, I drove back to Montana. The mountains looked softer than I remembered. I stopped along the road that curved toward Ash Hollow, the old house glowing faintly under the evening sky. The windows were lit, golden and familiar, like a photograph left in a drawer too long. I didn't go in. I only stood by the fence, the air still and heavy with pine. Goodbye. Mom, I said quietly. I kept what mattered. I turned back to the car, the breeze lifting my hair. The flash drive sat in my coat pocket. Not a secret anymore, just a memory. As I drove away, the lake caught the last of the sun, light spilling across its surface like molten glass. Some legacies are meant to be spent. Others are meant to be survived.